From our 22 News Broadcast Center, this is 22 News in Focus.
Good afternoon and welcome to 22 News in Focus. I'm Ciara Speller. National Recovery Month has been commemorated every September since 1989. The effort brings attention to the work of the recovery community and highlights treatment and substance abuse recovery practices. So this week on 22 News in Focus, we're taking a look at what's being done in our region and the state to support prevention and treatment. Additionally, we'll be discussing Suicide Prevention Month, also recognized in September. So joining me now is State Senator John Velas, who's currently the chairperson on the legislature's Joint Committee on Mental Health, Substance Use and Recovery. We thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me here.
So I want to start with some numbers. The Department of Public Health released a report in June, and it found that opioid-related deaths decreased last year with more than 2,100 confirmed and estimated overdose deaths in 2023. And that was compared to a record 2,357 in 2022. Also, the state's most rural areas record the highest overdose deaths compared to the urban and suburban areas. So what's being done to help reduce the number of overdose deaths in our state?
First thing I want to say is thank you for having me. Thank you for talking about this topic. It's something very near and dear to my heart. I am a person in recovery, and what I can tell you, and more importantly, what I could say to your viewers and anybody that would see this, is that recovery, I think, is the most beautiful thing in this world. So anybody who hears this, anybody who's struggling, please get the help that you need. What I can tell you is the state is doing a lot with respect to those numbers. Yeah, cautiously optimistic. They are marginally going down, but what I also tell you is that one overdose is too many, and it's also the 8th straight year in Massachusetts where we've had 2,000 plus overdose deaths. So trending in the right direction, cautiously optimistic, but you know, this substance use disorder, recovery, addiction, it's death by 1,000 cuts. I mean, the individual in question who's struggling, it doesn't discriminate, race, gender, socioeconomic status, where you live. It impacts everybody. There's literally not going to be a viewer that sees this that doesn't have someone, if not in their very close inner immediate family, a close family friend. It's just, it impacts everybody, and we need to continue to do more. But just to kind of some of the specifics, Narcan. Right? Narcan saves lives, disseminating that as far and as wide as we can. The Department of Public Health has dispensed well over 200,000 doses of Narcan, and we've got to make it easier so people can get medicine to stay alive. Medication for opiate use disorder, methadone, Suboxone, Vivitrol. I read a stat the other day that if we increase access just to methadone, we can cut overdoses by 50%. So we're doing a lot of good things, but we definitely have our work cut out for us. And
you were saying, you know, it doesn't discriminate, right?
Not at all.
So in stigma, that's a huge thing surrounding that too. You know, somebody could say, how could this happen? And then that could be you. You know, so talk about stigma.
Stigma is the 3 hardest words for any human being to say, are also the 3 most courageous words for any human being to say. I need help. And when someone does that, they need to be treated with dignity. They need to be helped. My job as the chairman of this committee, I would say, is that when someone does raise their hand and say, I need help, we need the system to be there, whether it's a treatment bed, whether it's Narcan, whether it's medication. We need to bring them in a judgment-free way and say, we are here to help you. We need to grab their hand, because what I will tell you is this. I personally, not reading anything, I personally have had people reach out to me where they raised their hand and said those words, I need help. There wasn't a bed available. They were told to call back, you know, at the end of the day, and they went out and they died. They overdosed, and that's just not the right answer. I also want to touch on another stigma that I think is so prevalent right now, and this is the stigma within the recovery communities. You know, there's different recovery for different individuals. I have what worked for me, which is a 12-step abstinence-based program, and then there's other people who need medication. There's other people who need different things. We need to get to a point where the best recovery is whatever works for the individual in question. Period, end of story, because that stigma within the recovery communities, I would argue, is just as prominent and profound as the other stigma. So another part of this that we need to get at and really encourage providers and people out there to look at people, meet them where they are and say, okay, this is the recovery that works for you. This is how you're going to be able to get your life back and live it and fulfill your dreams, and whatever that looks like to you, God bless you, go do it.
I think it's also important to touch on that rural areas are tending to see, these numbers, right? So here in Western Massachusetts, where we do have rural communities, what can be done specifically to help those areas?
So I had a roundtable discussion right after that report came out, and it said those numbers that showed we're trending in the right direction. They also pointed out some really bad things as well, and one of them was rural communities are seeing an uptick. I think there's any number of things we can point to. The lack of providers that are out there. If you speak to folks in a lot of the rural communities, what they'll tell you is they've got a lot of, I say a lot, they have PCPs, but they really don't have that specialized care that they really need for something like this. We could spend a lot of time talking about how I don't think providers are as equipped as they could be to deal with addiction. But transportation. We need to do better. A lot of these programs that can help people are not located in rural communities. So you have to get to a bus, you have to get a ride, you have to do something. For things like methadone, for the longest time, you had to go in there to get methadone, to get that medicine dispensed to you. COVID, we got better with that. You're allowed some take-homes. We need to get even better. But I think one of the biggest predicaments is transportation, being able to get to where that help is. Again, we need to meet people where they are. And if that's in an urban area, great. Suburban area, great. And certainly if it's in a rural area. Yeah,
so, on Beacon Hill, is your committee and the legislature working on any bills, for treatment and recovery?
Oh, absolutely. So both the House and the Senate passed a bill, a substance use disorder bill. We are in conference committee right now on that, having negotiations with our friends in the House of Representatives. I am on that conference committee. A lot of good things on that. I guess I'll just say this, harm reduction, which is really, really prominently displayed in that bill, in my opinion, is keeping people alive. And one thing that is obvious is that you can't treat a human being who is dead. You just can't. And fentanyl right now is present in 93% of our fatal drug overdoses. So awareness is another big part of this. What we're seeing is we talk a lot about an opiate crisis, but there's so many other things that are out there too. Alcohol use disorder, cocaine, stimulants, all these things have made a comeback. And what I'd also say is that fentanyl is not just in opiates. It's not in just heroin. It's in any number of substances. We're seeing it in stimulants. We're seeing it in all these other overdoses. And that really, really scares me because there's a lot of people who just don't know how contaminated this drug supply is. I would argue the drug supply right now is the most contaminated it's ever been because of fentanyl and some of its analogs. Incredibly dangerous. So that conference committee, I expect that we will have a bill out very, very soon. A lot of good things, recovery coaches, legitimizing that profession, giving them a licensure process, making it so, and just by way of background, a recovery coach, we can talk about them for hours, but the most important thing they offer is that shared lived experience. So when someone goes and says, hey, I've got a problem, I'm struggling with this, you wanna know what, there's someone there who also went through that same problem, that substance use disorder, to tell you how it is to navigate it. So tons of good stuff in that bill, a lot of insurance related things, big challenges in that space that we're dealing with. So yeah, we are dealing with this to the best of our ability, but there's still way too many people that are dying out there.
Yeah, our last couple of minutes on the segment, I want to touch on the fact that, of course, you're a veteran, and we thank you for your service. And your community also, like you said, not exempt from this.
Oh, no.
So what, kind of services are out there? What would you just want, members of the veteran community to know about getting help?
I would say not only are we not exempt, I would say if you look at some of the numbers, it's probably more exacerbated, right? And we could point to any number of things, PTSD, trauma that you were exposed to, long, repetitive deployments, all these things, that isolation that really contribute and exacerbate to addiction and substance use disorders are present in the veteran community. You've obviously got things like the VA, the Veterans Center, Swift River just opened up a great, Mara Vista opened up a great program right now for backing Year 6. I Got Year 6, the program's called, something along that, where they're actually catering their programs to veterans for the very simple reason that a lot of times what's driving the behavior in the veteran population could be, or at least a partial contributor could be, something that they saw in their service. And it's helpful if you have folks who have been exposed to that. And again, going back to that shared lived experience that a veteran would have with a fellow veteran. So there's a lot of resources out there. What's beautiful about this is there's getting to be more and more. People are realizing, just like, and not to digress for a second, but one of the things that we know is that whether it's, a race, a gender, a military veteran status, people tend to respond better to folks who, for all intents and purposes, have had that experience, look like them, have that shared lived experience in any number of ways. So one thing that we need to do, and we're really working on, and I should have said this before, is really trying to build up the workforce. So one of the things that we are doing is that we're spending a lot of money on things like loan forgiveness and scholarships, because the workforce challenges in this field, look, there's physical health, mental health, and then there's kind of substance use disorder. All of them are underfunded, but the latter two in particular, the reimbursement rates, all of these things that are out there are preventing kids and students right now from wanting to go into it, because they're looking at it and saying, I don't know if I can afford this right now. So there's a lot of challenges out there, but again, the Behavioral Trust Fund, so if anybody's applying or wants to go into something like this, they really need to check this out, because we are looking to pay for people who are to go into this field, but also who are living in underserved communities. So whether it's Western Massachusetts, rural communities, because there's a lot of geographic disparities as well.
Yeah, Senator John Vilas, always a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you for sharing your personal experience as well.
Thank you.
Thanks. And when we return, we'll learn the latest in recovery programs at Mira Vista Behavioral Health Center. You're watching 22 News in Focus. Welcome back to 22 News in Focus. Today's topic is National Recovery Month. So joining me now is Charlie DeRosa, a recovery support navigator at Mira Vista Behavioral Health Center. Thanks so much for joining us, Charlie.
Thank you, Sierra. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so tell us about your role and what that entails.
Yeah, so currently I'm a recovery support navigator through Mira Vista. And what that entails is when clients come into our facility and they are seeking treatment, in our facility, the one I work for is OTP, which is our methadone maintenance department. And when clients come in and they need extra resources, our recovery support navigator finds those resources out in the community, and they help them with that extra care. A lot of times with our patients and our clients that are coming in, they've just been beat down and they've just been very lost for many years, and they don't know where to turn. So it's my job, which is a very important role, to find those right resources to fit their needs, to make them as successful as possible in the recovery.
And I'm sure there's no direct answer here, but
Correct.
for people at home who might be watching and wondering, how does somebody get into substance use?
That question varies. Myself, I'm someone in recovery, long-term recovery. I celebrate 11 years this upcoming December. So
Congratulations.
Thank you so much. And I can tell you from my own personal experience, a lot of times it starts in the household. It starts at a young age, learning, finding those coping mechanisms, those unhealthy coping mechanisms that you learn from parents or family members. You've seen people drink or drug or using substances that for whatever reasons. And as you grow up in that household, with that trauma and whatever entails in that household, it's taught at a young age. But you're seeing also more nowadays, peer pressure, and it just varies across the board. Like I said, more with trauma and just not knowing healthy alternatives such as therapy and everything. It's just escaping the sense of reality when you're dealing with hard times.
Yeah, and I want to have you talk about the word intervention, right? Because that can be a really jarring, daunting word. But let's talk about what is that?
Yeah, exactly. Intervention, it's a very important term. It's a term where people are scared of it because it means change. And many times, when family and friends, they get together, what intervention usually typically looks like is, like I said, friends and family getting together, going to that loved one that's struggling with whatever substance use that they may be on or alcohol beverage. They get together and they express to them that, their lifestyle is pretty much unmanageable, they're headed down a bad path, and that they want them to seek treatment. Many times before that intervention takes place, they get with an interventionist, and that person will help them, find treatment facilities, so that way when the person is ready, they can transition smoothly into those treatment centers. But it's just showing that loved one that they have support and there's people behind them that will support them through that, that change.
Yeah, and so once somebody realizes that they do need help and they want that help, what are some of the steps that they can take to seek sobriety?
Yeah, many times, we have, they can email us, they can reach out, we have a hotline, or we also do outreach. We go out in the community, we set up a fold-up table with flyers and everything and try to recruit patients. But it's letting them know, first of all, like John was saying, meeting the clients where they're at, going out in the streets and letting them know about the services, making them aware of the services that are provided in the community. And when they are ready, letting them know, and transportation is a big one. Transportation, lets them know that, they have a successful way to get back and forth to treatment. And when they are ready, going out, picking them up, bringing them to our facility, giving them the treatment that they need, whatever that may be, if it's therapy, if it's counseling, if it's maintenance, in guiding them and supporting them throughout that process, and hoping that they be successful, and letting them know that we're there for them when they need us.
And let's talk about your facility specifically. What types of programs do you offer there?
Yeah, we offer inpatient and outpatient. So once again, the department I work in, we offer methadone maintenance, Suboxone maintenance, Vivitrol, Subutex. We also have our inpatient, which is adult psych. We have adolescent psych. We have an IOP department, which is inpatient Monday through Friday. Our clients will come in, we will transport them Monday through Friday from 9 to 1:30. It's 3 hours of counseling and groups and just structure work to show them different coping skills and healthier coping skills that they can deal with throughout their problems that they're struggling with. And then once again, the transportation is something newly that we started. We realized that that's such a big issue in the community. So we noticed ever since we started our transportation, getting clients to and from our facility, we've seen a very success rate with our clients being more successful because they're able to get to our facility.
Yeah, and recovery, it's a lifelong process,
sure
right?
is.
So just talk about the steps.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, it's one of those things, like I tell people, it's a full-time job, and I like to use the term, it's not a destination, it's a journey, and you got to constantly work it, and you can't, in another term, there's like a lot of cliche terms that we use, you can't stay sober today on yesterday's recovery, right? So you got to constantly work for it, and support is a big one, and that's why I tell families and friends, it's very important, there's a difference between support and enabling. So supporting the individual, and letting them know that you're with them and everything. But it's a lifelong journey, and I strongly believe that it comes with not only the medication aspect of it, but also to the mental health aspect of it. So finding a therapist that works for you, and no two clients are the same. So what works for one person might not work for another. So it's finding what works for you, finding your patterns on what makes you go back to a substance. And trying to avoid those things. So, yeah.
And how about some organizations that you might partner with?
Yeah, we have a lot of, in our area, there's a lot of great organizations. We partner with Hope for Holyoke. We like to partner with Tapestry. So every Wednesdays right now, we do some outreach with Tapestry. We go out in the community, like I was saying, and we meet with Tapestry. And when we meet in the community with Tapestry, and we set up our tables, we are advertising their treatment, they're advertising our treatment, and we're meeting the client dually. So we're offering our resources and everything, but also too, it's good to have Tapestry in places like Hope for Holyoke because they are very active in the community, and we're and they get out more. So since we're a main location, it's good to partner with those people that are out on the streets on a daily basis. So they let us know, where to find people, what people are in need, what they need for, treatment and everything. But those are two main. We have a lot of partners, but those are the two main ones that we like to work with as of recently, and that do a lot of work with us.
Yeah, getting out there and really hearing from the community, and hearing their needs. Yeah. And just quickly, I'll have you talk about the Joe on the Go.
Yeah.
What is that?
All right, so Joe on the Go is something that we came up with, and it's getting with our clients instead of just a high and the buy. It's really getting with our clients and meeting them where they're at and talking with them and figuring out what's going on with them. It's, who wouldn't mind having a conversation over a cup of Joe, right?
Right.
Yeah, so it's just getting with them and, picking their brain and, really getting to know our clients, and while we're getting to know our clients, and also letting them know that if they have any friends or family members or anyone that they know out in their community that is struggling, we like to give them, information to bring back to them and let them know that they can seek out our treatment. And sometimes if you see someone else going through treatment, it's not as scary because they know, hey, if they can do it, I can do it too. So it's like I said, just having a cup of coffee with a client and just having a conversation and really getting to know them and
And we have some important information on our screen right now. We have the phone number, we have the website as well.
That's
so
right. Yeah, thank
anybody
you,
has questions, they can just head over to your website.
That's right.
And you guys will be able to help them out.
Yes, transportation, whatever they may need, we'll be there for them.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Sierra.
And after the break, we'll learn about the importance of youth mental health programs. You're watching 22 News in Focus. Back here now, you're watching 22 News in Focus, and this summer, Mira Vista implemented a campaign to bring awareness to adolescent mental health. So here to talk about that program is Kim Lee, Chief of Creative Strategy and Development at Mira Vista Behavioral Health. We thank you for joining us on the program again.
Thank you so much for inviting me back.
So I just want to have you talk specifically about this initiative. Why a focus on teen and adolescent mental health?
Absolutely. When we were approaching summer, we knew that there would be thousands of students across not only Western Massachusetts, but really across the Commonwealth, who would be without those structures, who were not going to have the benefit of those extra set of eyes and ears, who were able to keep a watchful eye on our young people, most especially a watchful eye on how they were feeling emotionally and how they were doing in terms of their mental health. So we considered that, and we came up with the campaign, which was Adolescent Mental Health Doesn't Take a Summer Vacation. And we actually reached out to our very good partners, the Public Health Institute of Western Mass and their executive director, Jessica Collins. And within literally 5 seconds of listening to our campaign strategy and what we hoped to accomplish, they absolutely signed on 1,000%. So we really spent most of our summer being very active, being very proactive in terms of cascading that message out to the community, which is that adolescent mental health really doesn't take a vacation. And we really did see a lot of benefit to it. We had parents, we had trusted adult caregivers, we had young people who actually reached out to Mira Vista and wanted to learn more. So we felt that it really was a great service to be able to provide to the young people in our community.
And so as, working adults, we hear the word summer break and we think, what could be better? But for our young people and adolescents, that's always not the case. So talk about, some of the challenges that they do face during the summer.
And that's true, and whether it's summer vacation or Christmas vacation, April vacation, there are some students, some young people, not every, but there are many who really do benefit from and who rely upon the structure that they receive through their school day. So making that transition from a structured environment to an environment that is less structured, that's a little bit more relaxed and without intentional focus can be difficult for kids, especially. And I know when John was just on and we were talking about rural areas versus suburban areas, if you're in a rural setting, and you may not have an opportunity to really interact or to socialize with peers your own age, those summer breaks or those school vacation weeks can really be isolating for young ones who don't have the opportunity to hop on a bus or to get in a car. So it can be challenging for young people who are without that opportunity for socialization and that true sense of connectivity that the school day often brings.
Let's talk about some of the signs that, moms, dads, brothers, sisters, cousins, anybody really, should be looking out for when it comes to struggling with mental health with a young person.
You know, when there are changes in behavior, when there are changes in sleep, when there tends to be excessive worry, excessive sadness, those are opportunities to really engage in conversation with the young people in your lives, and to talk to your pediatrician, a primary care, to get more information. Absolutely, to go out. We do have wonderful resources available on the Mira Vista website. But more importantly, or as importantly I should say, is to ask the young people in your life how they're feeling, and not just physically, but how they're feeling emotionally. You know, my kids who are now 22 and 24, when they were growing up, once a week we hung up our phones, we hung up and hung out, and we just asked them 3 simple words, which were, and even continues to today, which is, how are you? And we don't just mean how are you feeling physically, we mean how are you? How are you feeling emotionally? What's happening in school? What's happening in your friends group? And they really, that simple question really did elicit some really important responses from our daughters. And it was information that we were very glad to have in terms of their emotional well-being. So ask the young people in your life, and to your point, a cousin, a daughter, a son, ask, how are you?
Yeah, and I like how you said, you know, we hung up and then we hung out. So
Yes.
hanging out, technology, being on the phone, such a huge part of, you know, a young person's life now. The importance of, you know, those boundaries and that quiet time and walking away from, you know, social media. Let's talk about that.
Just giving ourselves time and grace to just live in a space that's quiet. You know, I find myself at times reacting so quickly when that text buzz goes off or when my cell phone begins to ring. And it's important to just give ourselves time to silence that and to focus on how we're feeling, to turn it off during the day, to just have a quiet moment, deep breaths, some quiet meditative moments that just allow us to catch our breath and to allow, you know, more peace and a little less cell phone time. In fact, the U.S. Surgeon General is now considering warnings on cell phones, on social media for young people, just because of the amount of time that's spent on phones.
Yeah, and when should a parent or, you know, a caregiver maybe introduce professional help?
You know, and I'm not a clinician, but I have learned so much from the clinicians I work with at Mira Vista and the other nonprofit organizations I've worked with throughout my career. And when the young people in your life, when their behavior has gotten to the point where it is interrupting with their daily living, so somebody with anxiety, for example, or depression, when those challenges are really preventing them from enjoying life or living life to its fullest, that really is the time to pull in a professional.
Yeah, and so we had Charlie, you know, talk about some of your programs as well, but I just quickly want to have you tell us a little bit about, you know, what information seekers can expect to find on your website and, you know, how they can access the site as well.
The site is www.miravistabhc.care. That's important, it's .care instead of .com. But we have a section on our website which is just for resources, and we just recently put up, now that we've transitioned out of summer and young people are going back to school, we have a plethora of information up there for parents and adult caregivers, guidance counselors, because let's not forget that important population. You know, it's important that they themselves take care of their own mental health while they spend so much time caring and with great concern for the young people they see every day. But there's a questions and answers flyer with Dr. Nagar Beheshti, who is our Chief Medical Officer at Mira Vista, who is a child psychologist, who talks a little bit about the transition back to school, because we want young people now, you know, ready, set, thrive, to have a mentally healthy return to school.
Perfect. All right. Kim Lee with Mira Vista, thank you so much for being on the program.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
And after the break, we'll be talking with an organization dedicated to recovery in the Black community. Stay with us on 22 News in Focus. We're back now with 22 News in Focus. And the COVID-19 pandemic brought into the national spotlight the glaring disparity of access to health care for non-white communities, including mental health and substance use treatment. A Pew Research article says that, according to the CDC, the largest percentage increase in drug overdose deaths in recent years has been among African Americans, who often face more barriers to treatment due to stigma, bias, and socioeconomic status. So joining me now are representatives of the Black Behavioral Health Network, an organization dedicated to culturally appropriate community-based behavioral health services, and they're located in Springfield. We have Della Blake, the executive director, and Katrina Spicer, a clinician. We thank you both so much for being here on the program.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.
So I first just want to have you start by talking about, your organization.
Thank you for having us again. And Black Behavioral Health Network Incorporated was founded in March 2019 as a result of work that I was doing for the Department of Public Health and the Bureau of Substance Addiction Service. I organized a workforce development program that looked at certifying and licensing more people of color in the field of substance use treatment based on research that was done that looked at why Black and Latino clients weren't successfully completing treatment, and one of the findings indicated it was because of the lack of cultural identity. As a result of doing that work, it occurred to me that in Western Mass, where we work, where we live, there hadn't been culturally specific services for the African American community for maybe over, I want to say 30 years.
Wow.
So as a result of the work I was doing in terms of training these professionals, then it became about training these professionals to come back into our community and start doing the work for our community.
Yeah, and Katrina, could I have you just talk about your mission?
So, generally speaking, our mission is about providing culturally appropriate, culturally sensitive, representative substance use behavioral health services, and also transitional services for those in Hampden County. Mm-hmm. Specifically the BIPOC community, with a focus on Black and African American members of that community. What I do specifically as a clinician is substance use counseling, either in a group or a one-on-one setting. And I also, we run a 12-week transformations group that I take inside the Mill Street facility once a week.
And I wanted to piggyback a little bit off of something that Senator Vilas said, and that you talked about in terms of the numbers of opioid overdose incidences that have gone down in Western Mass. The Census Bureau has the Black population in Springfield at 16%. Opioid overdoses have gone down significantly for the, well, maybe not significantly, but has gone down in white communities. Latino communities have recognized a slight increase. 16% of the population, African Americans, opioid overdose has doubled. Mm-hmm. So when we look at what is being done and is there enough services out here to address the need, the question would be, we need to do more. And so as part of our mission, we're looking to see where these gaps are, what are the disparities. And we want to get back to supporting the community with support programs where people can culturally identify.
Mm-hmm. And when accessing treatment, let's talk about some of the struggles that the Black community facing.
So, it's lack of access. transportation is a problem. I think one of the big things that we offer at Black Behavioral Health Network at this time is because we are getting funding, is an opportunity not to have to deal with the red tape that goes into filling out the insurance paperwork. And when people are in need of services and they come to our agency for support, we're able to just go and support the community needs. Historically, as a community of individuals, the medical field, our people don't trust. You know, they don't trust the medical field because of abuse and the experiments that we went through. And the sad thing to say is, you know, we're still experiencing discrimination and bias.
Yeah, so you mentioned culturally appropriate services, right? So let's talk about exactly what that is.
So it is, from where I sit, it is extremely important to have someone who is seeking substance use treatment, mental health treatment, to be able to trust that the person sitting across from them not only understands what they're dealing with in their substance use, but also has an understanding of what they carry culturally, whether that's historically culturally, that's unspoken, or community culturally in where they live, familial culturally, without having to explain it, without having to historically place it within a time and a place, where they can come into treatment, come into therapy with staff who understand the nuances of the culture.
Yeah, the cultural competence piece is key.
Beyond understanding what is taught at trainings, right? Yeah. But what is intrinsically known from being within that community. Again, without explanation.
Right.
And respect. You know, a lot of folks from our community need to be able to approach programs for services and be respected. Folks usually know what they need in order to recover. And it's about affording that respect, listening to the stories that play a role in why people use and abuse substances. Sometimes, you know, if I'm a counselor and I hear a story coming from someone that doesn't look like me, I might have a hard time understanding, well, what did that have to do with you becoming addicted to substances?
Right, and also understanding things, having worked in this field for a number of years, you know, there are lanes that we take with clients, right? And one of those lanes is, well, it will be easier if you don't go back to the environment in which you came from because it's not a safe environment. But oftentimes, especially in communities of color, going to a long-term halfway house is not an option. You may, not only because you may have kids, you may have elders that are relying on you. You may have aunties, uncles, whatever in your family that you can't separate from. And so the idea of not going back within your community is just not an option. Having people who you are working with who understand that, who then can provide options for how you continue what you started in treatment in terms of your recovery within that environment, with that kind of understanding.
And we have a full screen up here. I know so much subject matter and such a short amount of time to talk about it, but just want to tell our viewers that they can find any information they need with your organization to get in touch with you and to learn more about the work that you're doing.
Thank you.
Della, Katrina, thank you so much for the work that you're doing in the community.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. September is also recognized as National Suicide Prevention Month, and we'll find out what prevention efforts are underway in Massachusetts after the short break. You're watching 22 News in Focus. Welcome back to 22 News in Focus, and we want to warn our viewers that we will be discussing suicide in this segment. September is National Suicide Prevention Month, and it's the leading cause of death in the United States, and it saw an increase during the COVID-19 pandemic. There are many reasons why a person purposefully harms themselves to end their life, and during this segment, we will be discussing risk factors as well as prevention efforts. So joining me now is Jen Matoney, co-chair of the Pioneer Valley Coalition for Suicide Prevention. And Jen, we thank you so much for coming here and, talking about the subject matter that it's hard for a lot of people to hear about this as well.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
So let's talk about what the Pioneer Valley Coalition for Suicide Prevention is and what your mission is.
Yes, so we are one of the state's 10 regional coalitions. We have funding from the Department of Public Health, and we are mostly a volunteer-based organization, and we're made up of suicide loss survivors, suicide attempt survivors, and also professionals who work in the field. We have people involved who are all ages. I myself am a suicide loss survivor, which is why I got involved. I lost my mom to suicide in 2007. And thank you so much. And I like to think that I am turning my pain into purpose now, and I work with some really great people who are doing the same. And so our goal is really to, reduce suicides in the 3 counties that we cover, which are Franklin, Hampshire, and Hampden counties. And we do this in a variety of ways.
And talk about some of the resources and the programs that you offer.
Yes, so our parent organization, the Massachusetts Coalition for Suicide Prevention, they have a toolkit about social and racial justice in suicide prevention. So that is a very unique resource that we offer. There are also trainings that are put on by the state that are free, so we help to publicize those. Many of us also are suicide prevention trainers ourselves and are connected with other trainers, so we'd like to help connect different groups that want education to bring it to them for free. One time we made care packages for suicide loss survivors and another care package for suicide attempt survivors. We have just done a whole different variety of projects. We have literature that we've created, and then we also collect literature from national organizations that we hand out to try and educate the community. We're always out there tabling and having conversations with people, answering questions. Sometimes it's very personal conversations we're having with people. When we share our stories, they tend to share their stories with us, or they let us know about someone they're concerned about and ask us what they should do. So it's great when we, are out there in the community talking with people.
And you mentioned community, so how about community partners?
Yes, we have a lot of community partners. One of our regular members are from BHN, the Department of Mental Health, the Western Mass office of that. We are very involved also with the Beta Alpha Zeta Zeta sorority, which is a Black women's sorority, a service sorority. Also the East Hampton Coalition for Veterans Wellness. We've even collaborated at times with different art galleries, like the Anchor House of Artists in Northampton, Families Against Violence in Springfield, which is focused on domestic violence. And when we can help prevent any of these types of problems, substance use, domestic violence, that also helps prevent suicide ultimately.
And how about community outreach efforts?
Well, like I mentioned, we do a lot of tabling. We have different flyers that we've developed, some for the general population, some for specific populations. Like we have one that is strictly resources for the Black community, then one that is resources for the Latinx community. We also hold events. So we have had a couple of annual summits that we do. One of them was called the Innovation Summit, and we tried to engage people who aren't normally involved in suicide prevention, so that they can help us come up with new ideas and new solutions. We also have a series of community conversations that we're doing, and we're focusing on the older adult population. Nationally, the older adult population has a high rate of suicide, unfortunately. So we really want to focus on wellness for them. We've been working with a lot of the area senior centers. We had one of these community conversation events at the Hadley Senior Center in Hampshire County earlier this year. We have one planned for Greenfield, and then next year we'll have one in Hampden County. I also want to tell you about some of our partners events, because with it being Suicide Prevention Month, this is the time of year when there are some annual events going on. So, for example, AFSP, the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention's Massachusetts chapter, has an Out of the Darkness walk in Agawam, and that's on October 26th. And then also a international event that takes place every year is called International Survivors of Suicide Loss Day, and it always occurs on the Saturday before Thanksgiving. This year that's on the 23rd, and it's a chance for loss survivors to get together and have a day of healing and of maybe sharing about their grief and what has helped, and it's just a lovely community event for that specific group.
Yeah, and so what should we know about suicide risk?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a complicated question, but, suicide risk can change over time. For example, I can share a little bit of a personal story. So I knew that my mom was struggling with depression. She had some resources and some medication, but there was a time when I asked her, have you thought about suicide before? And she said, in my deepest, darkest depression, I have, but I wouldn't do that to you guys. Talking about our family, we were a family of 5 at the time. And I didn't realize that could change. I kind of took that as like this big sigh of relief, like, oh, I don't have to worry about this. And really, knowing everything I know now, and of course, hindsight is 20/20, I would have known that I needed to check in with her more often about that, and that it's good to regularly check in, and that risk can change. So there's also lots of things that we can look for that might indicate risk, and then sometimes we really don't know when someone is at risk, and we can't always know. But as I was saying, it is really important to reach out.
Yes, and of course another really important topic, and I wish we had more time to really do a deep dive into this, but we have another full screen up for our viewers at home. Just have you quickly talk about, those numbers.
Oh yes, the 988 is an excellent resource. It's free, it's 24/7, it's confidential, and anyone can call that. You don't have to be having a suicidal crisis. You could be worried about someone, you could be having some other type of mental health crisis, and they are always there to support people. There's trained counselors on the other end. I know they have it for Spanish. They have an extension for LGBTQ plus youth that's answered by the Trevor Project. And veterans as well. They have an extension just for veterans. So it's a wonderful resource.
Thank you so much for being on the program and opening up about your experience and providing some really crucial information for our viewers here. So we thank you for your time on the program.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.